This video touches on two important issues involved in our critical thinking about music. They will serve as bookends for this short survey of American folk traditions. We'll start by thinking more about how music might have meaning, and we'll end by talking about how we might better understand music through thinking about the categories into which it is often placed. Make sure you listen to the music covered in this video on the YouTube playlist linked to the course website. As I have alluded to previously, this term we are studying music from a more critical perspective than perhaps you've used as you've listened to music in the past. By critical, of course, I do not mean negative. Rather, I mean that we seek to make reasonable and logical statements about music that are backed up by insightful observations about musical elements. A good place to start is to ponder the ways in which we might find music to be meaningful. In the 21st century Western world, we use music in many ways. Music is certainly part of our attempts to enjoy life and entertain ourselves and others. We sing, dance, perform, and listen to music. Although perhaps not as typical in 21st century North America as in other times and places, sometimes we associate music with our work. As has been the case for millennia, human beings continue to make music part of their acts of worship. A final way in which we often approach music is to hear it as expressive of emotions and ideas. Music and the emotions have been perceived as closely connected since ancient times. There's also a very long tradition of music understood as communicative of ideas, ideas such as freedom or justice, good or evil. Ideas and emotions are sometimes heard in music without words. It is perhaps easiest, however, to note connections between music, emotions, and ideas in songs which tell stories of human experience using words. In this video, we turn to 4 such songs. The first song to which I want you to listen is the folk song Barbara Allen. This is an old song, a very old song. Our first references to it come from 17th century English sources. It was apparently brought to North America by the English and continued to be sung by the mountain people of the Appalachians long after it ceased to be popular in the British Isles. It tells the story of a young woman who is summoned to the deathbed of a young man who loves her. She refuses to profess her love to him, but after he dies regrets this, and she herself dies from a broken heart. Musically speaking, it is a good example of a conjunct melodic line that uses mostly stepwise motion and a narrow range. It is in a simple verse form. Each new verse is sung to the same music. The simplicity of its form and musical elements allow the words of the song to take center stage. This folk tune, Barbara Allen, has been covered by everyone, from Bob Dylan and Dolly Parton to Art Garfunkel and Joan Baez. The YouTube clip on your playlist has just a couple of verses of the song as they appeared in the film The Songcatcher. The Songcatcher from around 2000 was a fictional account of folk song research done in the Appalachian Mountains at the turn of the 20th century. This song in the film is sung by a young girl who is played by Amy Rossum. This young girl has learned it from her granny. The music scholar who is asking her to sing is shocked. Having grown up associating the song with Great Britain, and especially in her studies associating it with Great Britain, she's really shocked that it exists in the Appalachian Mountains almost unchanged from how it was in the 17th century in Great Britain. We've already rather extensively looked at the simple verse-chorus form of Can the Circle Be Unbroken by the Carter Family. As we noted at that time, the text of this song is about experiencing one's mother's death and hoping to meet again one day in the sky, Lord, in the sky. This is a good example of folk music that concerns itself with religious belief and the experience of faith. The Carter Family recording is also an example of the commercialization of folk music. Although the folk song had been sung for several decades by the time that the Carter Family recorded it in the late 1920s, it was really their recording that made it popular. Their recording was played by radio stations, and it was sold as a phonograph record for playback in the home. And it was also through recording such songs as Can the Circle Be Unbroken that the Carter Family was able to make a living. Although not all folk music is political, folk music and politics were often closely linked in American history of the 20th century. Woody Guthrie was one of the first 20th century Americans to make such strong connections. Born in 1912 and dying in 1967, Guthrie traveled with migrant workers from Oklahoma to California during the Dust Bowl and in the wake of the Great Depression. He sang traditional folk music, cowboy songs, the blues, and children's music, and he wrote his own ballads or narrative songs. As you can see in the photo on his screen, his guitar had a sticker on it proclaiming, "This machine kills fascists." The story goes that after tiring of hearing Irving Berlin's God Bless America, Guthrie wrote This Land Is Your Land, subtitling it God Blessed America for Me. As is typical, the first line of the song gives the song its title, This land is your land, this land is my land. The verse continues to describe the natural beauties of North America, as does much of the rest of the song. The first verse ends with the line, This land was made for you and me. A version of this line ends each of Guthrie's verses, underlining the theme of Guthrie's song. In two of the later verses, Woody Guthrie wrote lines praising public lands over privately owned property and protesting against a system that saw hungry individuals standing in relief lines for food. In this way, the song, which is certainly a statement of national unity, is also a statement of protest. This land is your land is most often sung as a simple verse form. Guthrie borrowed a tune from a Carter family song for its melody. The melody has a very small range and moves with mostly stepwise motion, making it very conjunct. It might be heard in two phrases. This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York harbor. And then the second phrase, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream water. This land is made for you and me. You can see those two phrases start the same, but they end slightly differently. The tune is in a major key and the harmonies are very simple. Guthrie's own performance of it, which you can hear on the YouTube playlist, features a homophonic texture, that is, his singing of the melody line and playing of guitar chords as accompaniment. The simplicity of its melody, harmonies, and textures makes it easy to learn and sing in groups. There is very little to distract the listener from the words. The final important American folk singer I wish to draw your attention to in this video is Huddie William Ledbetter, more typically known by his nickname Leadbelly. Leadbelly was an African-American blues and folk singer who lived from 1888 to 1949. He sang a variety of songs, much like Woody Guthrie did, from gospel and the blues and folk songs and folk songs and children's songs. He was part of the African American songster tradition, a tradition which included the performance of work songs, songs that had been first sung by slaves on plantations as they worked in the fields. As the title suggests, Pick a Bale of Cotton is a work song. Its lyrics speak of the work of picking cotton. However, its fast and ever faster tempo and the descriptions of jumping down and turning around have led most historians to the conclusion that it is a song that was most likely also performed as dance music within African American communities. As you listen to Leadbelly perform it, note his guitar playing. Although Leadbelly played several instruments, he was most famous for his finger-picking 12-string guitar style. There is one final issue to be covered in this video, and that is the topic of the categorization of music. Categorization is a double-edged sword. At its worst, it establishes rigid boundaries that may not always pertain. It can, however, help us understand a topic. And in the case of music, it helps us compare and contrast the music of the world to get a sense of both the continuities and innovations of the musical world. So in the spirit of furthering understanding, we might categorize music into three spheres of popular, classical, and folk music. Most of the music that we have talked about as part of this video presentation is most strongly associated with folk music. Folk music is music that is meant for the people, for the folk. It should be simple enough for everyone to learn. It's music that is meant to accompany the living of life, working, dancing, worship. It is music that is most often passed down from one generation to the next, from father to son, from grandmother to granddaughter. Now, like folk music, classical or art music is music that has stood the test of time. In contrast to folk music, however, classical music is generally taught in formal learning environments and performed by musicians who have spent years mastering their techniques. A third category is popular music. Popular music is by name and definition popular. It is music that is disseminated to the masses and listened to by large numbers of people. Although popular music has been around for centuries, it has seen its heyday since the recording and broadcasting technologies that emerged in the 20th century. 200 years ago, if you wanted to listen to the newest sounds, say from China, you would have had to embark on a month-long, actually a multi-month long, and dangerous and long ocean voyage. Today, we simply turn on the internet and within minutes, if not seconds, can receive a live broadcast from halfway around the world. Now, the interaction of these three categories, especially the pop and folk categories, will be one of the major themes of this course. Notice from the diagram on the screen that these are not mutually exclusive domains. As we saw with Can the Circle Be Unbroken, music might sometimes be both popular and folk. As we turn to the music of jazz, we will find pieces that belong to all three categories, and we might even find examples of music that exhibit characteristics of all three categories. So it is to that music that we turn our attention and focus on the music that directly preceded and influenced jazz. That will be the music of the next video.